Welcome into the VOLatile podcast, your weekly reminder that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. My name is Mac Williams, and I'm joined tonight by my good friends Nick Duncan and Joe Davis. Joe, glad to have you back on the podcast this week. How are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing well. It's great to be back, and sorry I missed last week, but I heard it was great.
Yeah, we had a good time. Reed was an excellent guest, and we got a lot of good content. So, Nick, how are you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little fired up, so I'm ready to go. Ready to talk. Ready to bask in the glory of my basketball predictions. Ready to say that I was right to not walk off the ledge about Josh Elander. I'm just feeling good about where I'm at with Tennessee sports right now, and I feel like I'm seeing clearly. So I feel like I'm the only one. So.
Wow, that's sick. Geez. To be clear, this team is playing just fine without Cade Phillips, so I'm not sure what you're right about basketball. Anyways, let's get into some latest news here. Tennessee basketball goes 1-1 this week, dropping their game against Alabama, but beating South Carolina on the road. And then Tennessee baseball goes 4-1 since our last recording. We beat Arizona State, Virginia Tech, East Tennessee State, and Oakland tonight, but we did lose kind of the biggest game of the last 5 over this past week since our last recording. That was against UCLA. So we're going to kind of get into basketball and baseball tonight. Should be, a little bit more compacted show compared to our last few, just because don't have any football news, and we're kind of coming down the stretch here in basketball, and baseball is just getting ramped up. So let's go ahead and jump into basketball. Guys, so Tennessee lost to Alabama at home 71-69, 2-point loss at home on Saturday night. I think the biggest news, obviously, from that game is Nate Ament went down with an apparent lower extremity injury. Not exactly sure what the details are surrounding that. I don't know if you guys have heard anything more serious. But let's just start with the first question here. Do you guys think that this is like a serious injury since he didn't play against South Carolina, or are they just kind of taking their time, rehabbing him back? What are your thoughts on that? Nick, why don't you get started?
Yeah. Rick Barnes said some stuff about maybe this kind of being a blessing in disguise for the rest of the guys and learning how to play and not rely on Nate. And I don't know. He was laissez-faire enough with some of those comments that I think Nate's probably fine, that they're probably I think it's possible we don't see him again until the NCAA tournament, but I don't think that he's going to be out for the rest of the season. I think it's possible just that, one regular season game left, I think, and then the tournament and the SEC tournament's probably not going to move the needle much for this team on seeding one way or the other. So I just think it's possible we don't see him for a couple weeks, but my feeling is that he's not, out for the rest of the season. So
yeah, I mean, they did some courtside shots of him during the South Carolina game, and he didn't have the look of a player who's like seriously injured. He had the look of a player who's being rested. So I'm not super worried about it. I agree with Nick. I think it's a tactical rest because there's just not much to win. There's not much to lose, assuming that you can kind of handle your business where you're supposed to handle your business. And yeah, I think it's a tactical rest.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think that it was evaluated as potentially serious or serious at all during that game, considering he comes back in. I don't know how you put your 5-star NBA lottery draft pick guy who's carried your team all season. I don't even know how you would begin to risk him in that game if the trainers are evaluating it and like, hey, this could be something serious. We don't know. Or if they're like, hey, this is something serious. Obviously, there's no way you put him back in the game, right? Like,
yeah.
The fact that he went in the game, clearly to me, it says like they evaluated him. He's fine. But maybe he didn't play against South Carolina because he's a little sore or whatever, and there's just no reason to risk it. I did think what you said, Nick, was interesting about him not playing again to the NCAA tournament because Grant Ramey on VolQuest said something similar. And I just have a hard time understanding why you wouldn't, if what we're saying is true, like if he's okay, he's just a little sore, why wouldn't you play him in the SEC tournament? Like, yeah. I understand that doesn't help you with seeding, but it's the SEC tournament. Like, do we not care about that anymore?
Yeah, it's a good question. I will say, like, there's I actually think that there's potential for that to be a bad call because a guy sits so long he kind of gets cold.
You're saying him waiting until the NCAA tournament could be a bad call.
Yep.
Okay.
But I just think that's that like real politic. That's kind of like a possibility, right? Just because I don't think that tournament will move the needle a lot. And I want to win the SEC tournament, but I think we all kind of recognize like the rhythms of March and how they go. And it's often the case that if a team that, goes on a run, wins their conference tournament, doesn't typically, that doesn't always translate into playing well in the NCAA tournament. And so, so I don't think I think that's just as a fan, like looking at rhythms. I don't think that the players are going to go into obviously the SEC tournament kind of thinking that, but I just think it's possible. I didn't know Grant Ramey said that, but I do think that that's a possibility. And as a fan, like I want to, there's like, I want to win that tournament, but I also, again, like knowing the rhythms could see like it being better for Tennessee to like just drop their first one and move on and just like new season, NCAA tournament. So, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. So I think, I think it makes sense to be like, well, let's just say we knew for sure that your success in the SEC tournament would either be a help or a hurt in March in the NCAA tournament. Like if you go further in the SEC tournament, you're not going to play as well in the NCAA tournament or vice versa. If we knew that for sure, I obviously would be like, well, I'd rather do better in the NCAA tournament. My question to follow up with that though is how good is this team? Like, is there any chance that we make it past the first weekend? Like, it doesn't feel like any of us really think that. So if
going to lose in the
what,
round of 32.
Sure. So if we're losing in the round of 32, I'd rather put all our chips in the SEC tournament and try and win the thing. That's just me personally.
I agree as a fan. I just don't know that I don't know that like for Rick Barnes, that's the way it'll play out because obviously he's not thinking I'm going to lose in the round of 32. I mean, I hope not anyway. Good grief. But
you got to play the winning strategy, right? I mean, and I don't think we should delude ourselves into thinking that this team is going to make a deep run. There's just too many question marks, too many holes, too many mistakes, too many. But you gotta do what's best. I think you have to play the best hand that you've got, and I think the best hand he's got is to rest Nate. So
yeah. I mean, I think all of us would say we're baseball guys more than basketball guys. Jeff's the only one excluded on the podcast, but it's just hard because I look at the 2024 baseball team and I'm like, this team was frankly a bit underwhelming in the regular season compared to the 2023 season when we were the number one team in the country and got put out in the Supers by Notre Dame.
Yep.
And so I'm like, I just saw that team, in 2024 go on a run, win the SC tournament. And I vividly remember us talking about, well, it's awesome that we won the SC tournament again, but it feels like, this team is not going to be able to win in Omaha because like it seems like this narrative, right? When you play Super Bowl in your conference tournament, it doesn't translate to the postseason. And then obviously the 2024 baseball team went on the national championship. And I know baseball and basketball are different, but I'm also like, can the same logic not apply here? Like, is it not like, I don't know. I
think it could if Tony Vitello was our basketball coach.
Good point. Yeah, I mean Rick Barnes is no Tony V, but
does this bring up? Is the SEC tournament like a bowl game? I mean, are we kind of in a similar situation here where you have these things that we do at the end of the season that just don't carry the kind of weight and heft that they used to?
Well, I see what you're saying. I think I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think the SC tournament is more like, and this is going to sound crazy at the beginning. I think it's more like the SC championship game, right? And I know we said like, well, that's a championship game, but it's like we've already seen the SC championship game kind of be devalued over the last few seasons, anyways.
Yeah.
So
and that's a better an analogy or comparison.
But
with the SEC championship game, we've actually seen it may be better for you to not win the championship. Like you may have an easier road to the national championship if you're
in fact you will
as opposed to a top seed.
Right. Yeah. In fact,
So
you will. Like, look at Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss didn't have
right,
to play in
right,
the SC championship game this year. They got I think they were the 6th seed, where this, because
right,
Oregon was the 5. And, they played, who was it? Tulane at home, right? They played
right.
Tulane, and then they go on. Like,
As they should have.
Let's not
right.
do that. Good grief. Oh my gosh.
And so it's just like, I don't know. Call me crazy, but I still care about the SC championship. I still care about it in football. I
Sure.
still care about it in basketball. I still care about it in baseball. And obviously, I'd rather do well in the actual national postseason. But we all agree, I just don't think this team's capable of it. So, like you said, Nick, as a fan, I would love to see us go all in on the SC tournament and try and win.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think we've had, obviously with football, it's all new and we're all still kind of wading through the waters of the championships and stuff like that. With basketball, we have a long history and track record of this. I don't know the stats on this, but it seems like the SEC, higher seeds, 1, 2 seeds don't typically win that tournament, because if you're a 1 or 2 seed in the SEC tournament, you're probably like a 1 to 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. And so
Right.
I just think there's less to play for. It may be that Tennessee can go and run and win that tournament because they are kind of outside of that. They're going to be outside of kind of that top 4 seed.
Mhm.
They're probably not going to have a double bye. And so, it could be that they go on a little run just because the other teams aren't as motivated, because they kind of know they're going to be a higher seed and this isn't going to move the needle for them.
Yeah.
So I don't think it moves the needle for us a ton either. I mean, I think we're talking about you win that tournament, maybe you bump up like 1 seed. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to win it. I'd love to cut the nets down. That'd be awesome.
Yep. Yeah, it would be. Well, let's get back to the Bama game specifically. I think it was a good conversation. But the biggest takeaway outside of Nate's injury, that was kind of the most meaningful thing that happened in the game. But the game was brutal because, Tennessee blew another double-digit lead in this game. And Tennessee, I mean, frankly, was in control for the entire game. And
Till the very end.
Till the very end, and found a way to lose that game. It's just tiring. Like this team is so tired. Like how have we not learned, even within just this year alone, how have we not learned to play with the lead after all the times that it's come back to bite us?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't know, but I do expect it at this point. That's why I picked them to lose. I just want to remind the listeners of that I picked Tennessee to lose to Alabama in this game. And was hoping and was thinking for a long time that I was going to be wrong. But that's just, I don't know, man. They just can't close out a basketball game. So, I mean, we have seen them close out a few, but not against really like the elite teams. I mean, probably Vanderbilt's the lone exception. But I don't really get it. There's just, when it comes to the end of the game, there's no dog in them. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely no clutch factor. At least, I mean, it doesn't feel like obviously Nate Ament's been great this year, and he didn't play at the end of this game. So like maybe the end of the game goes differently with Nate Ament in the game. Maybe so. But in all of these games where you've blown a lead, Nate Ament specifically, just because he seems like he could be this guy, has not done the thing where he just takes over and scores the basket when you need the basket, and you'd like to think that Jacoby Gillespie is that, having way more experience and being an elite scorer at times. You think he could do that, but there just doesn't seem to be
he regresses to like a high school basketball level player inside of 5 minutes. I mean, he just goes completely brain dead. It's unreal.
Yeah. I just don't. I don't think there's an alpha on this team. Like I think Nate Ament is high caliber talent, is gonna have a shot to have a good NBA career, but there is not an alpha on this team.
Killer instinct. Killer instinct.
And it shows. It shows.
There ain't no Dalton Connect ain't walking through that door.
Yeah.
Not even Chaz Lanier.
Yeah. Yeah, unsung hero, Chaz Lanier. Yeah, I mean, Chaz Lanier played a lot better than people remember last year.
Yep. I mean, he was overshadowed because of Dalton, but they'd kill to have Chaz Lanier right now.
Yep.
We call it the Casey Clausen effect.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, do we have any other thoughts about Bama at home? I mean, it just feels like more of the same, right? I mean, I don't think we really have anything else there. So let's go on to the South Carolina game. This game was obviously much more fun as a viewer, as a fan. Tennessee goes on the road and pretty much just dominates South Carolina the entire time. Tennessee wins 78-59 on the road. Was there anybody that was impressive to you? Who disappointed you? Joe, you already kind of talked about this a little bit, so I want to hear you go first. Who impressed you or who disappointed you in that game?
Yeah, so full cards on the table. I was working one of my mini jobs during the Alabama game, so I only was catching what you guys were saying during the game in our chat. So I don't know if this is if this performance is as impressive to you guys as it was to me. But I thought Estrella played really well in the South Carolina game, and I think that obviously Tennessee's strength is down low with their bigs in the paint. We're not a very good 3-point shooting team, but we rebound offensively, best in the country and best I've ever. I'm not a big basketball guy, so I don't know how this team's offensive rebounding capabilities stacks up against the great teams of the past. I don't have any context or caliber for that. But when I'm just watching them play, I mean, they're just ball hogs, at the glass. And they actually weren't super impressive in that particular category in the South Carolina game, but they did plenty. Obviously, they won the game in dominant fashion. I say all that to say I thought Estrella down low, he's got that sort of, I don't know what to call it, but it's, if he gets the ball and he just has that sort of turnaround hook shot that he's able to deliver on pretty consistently. And, I think that if I'm thinking about like, what was the one thing that stood out to me that I just hadn't really seen a lot of Tennessee doing? We know that they've got a lot of action down there. They can get the alley-oop. They've shown that consistently throughout the year. I mean, they're doing a lot of good things down in the paint, but the one thing that seems to have been missing for me is that like contested short to mid-range hook shot. Like, can you nail those pretty consistently? I thought Estrella did really well doing that. I also feel obligated to say I thought Carey played a pretty good game.
There it is.
I've been down on Carey. I'll be the first to own it.
Eat your crow, you son of a gun.
I don't. No, hang on.
Jeff Front's not here to protect you or not, little boy.
I'll eat a little crow. I will say this.
Oh, here we go.
I still think his offensive production's got to go up. I mean, I know we're at the end of the season and there's not really.
Nobody's not been saying that.
It's just tournament play, but his offense. I mean, there was even one moment where he was on a breakaway, and he had a chance really at a 3-point play because they were going to foul him, and he's just not hustling down to the basket. And you got to go up, put the shot up, get fouled. You may score that, get a chance at a 3-point play. He ended up shooting freeze, and I think he hit maybe 1 of 2, which is fine. But even stuff like that, and even the announcers were like, I think Barnes is upset that he's not got more of an offensive instinct, but early in the game, he actually had some looks down low, and instead of just automatically dishing it out, he actually took some shots. Didn't make them all, but I'm saying, that's improvement for me, right? Like I've been so frustrated with him because he'll have these, good looks down low, and the man just doesn't take a shot. And so I thought I saw improvement there. I still think there is room for improvement. I don't know how much that matters here this late in the season. But I'll eat a little bit of crow. I thought Carey played really well. The guy's a rebounding machine. Okay. I grant that.
That's why he's in the game, baby. It's everything off the ball.
It's the offensive. When you've got a good look, you got to take your shot. You're a big, you got to go. I mean, he's not off par. He's not playing above the rim, but you got to take your shot, draw the foul, go to the free throw line, make 1 of 2. That's fine. I've just been really frustrated with him. I thought he played better. Yeah, I have other notes from the game, but I'm monopolizing the time. So, Nick,
Well,
I mean, what was your takeaway?
I want Nick to say the thing that he's been saying, and I don't know if you've said this for sure on the podcast or not, Nick, but I know you've said it to me about Jalen Carey. What's the thing you always say about his scoring?
What's the thing I always say about Jalen Carey scoring?
Yeah, do you need me to? Are you getting it or no?
I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
What Nick always says, listener, what he always says, and this is for you too, Joe, if this team needs Jalen Carey
that's true.
To carry us on offense or to be elite down low on offense, to be scoring, this is not a good team. That is not the recipe for success for this team. Jalen Carey is filling his role in what we need him to do. Could he improve in areas? Of course. Of course.
But we're talking about situational basketball. I hear you from a 30,000 foot view. Like Jalen Carey shouldn't have 20 points. I'm not arguing for that, right? I'm not saying that. But situationally, when you have a good look down low, you got to take your shot. You can't constantly dish it out, especially because this team can't shoot threes.
Well, I don't think he has. I don't think he has been doing that though, Joe. See, I think
he's too quick to dish it out.
What I would communicate, and this is just what I've picked up from you, what I would communicate is that you are frustrated with his lack of scoring, specifically his inconsistency around the rim, scoring the basketball. And as that's become a bigger and bigger issue, which I grant that it has, that's where I saw the uptick in his dishing and passing. And to me, what that communicates is a guy who cares more about the team's success than fixing his own game in the moment in the middle of the season. I think
Right.
Jalen Carey is quick to pass because he knows he's struggling right now. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing.
I mean, sure. Okay, fine. If the guy can't score, I guess dish, but like score. If you've got a good look down low, put the ball in the net.
I feel like that's what I would be saying if we were talking about like Nate Ament. Like when you go into a season, everybody has a role on a team. And Nate Ament's role is to score the ball. And Jalen Carey's role is not to score the ball. So if he's struggling at the rim, he doesn't have confidence, then he needs to give the ball to somebody that can score the ball.
But if you've got the look, you've got to be able to score at this level. That's what I'm saying. I need Jeff. Jeff will back me up here.
Exactly. You're all by yourself.
This is volleyball, baby.
This is
the Jalen Carey podcasting.
Getting bodied.
The difference
right now.
The difference between what you're saying and what I'm saying is the difference between looking at the team at a 30,000-foot view versus looking at situational basketball.
I think it's the difference in looking at it rightly and looking at it wrongly.
No, hang on. What I'm saying is this is why I think, stats and spreadsheets, and someone earlier in our chat had put in like a graph of like, this is what Tennessee looks like. All that stuff is matters. All that stuff is important. I'm not saying it's not, but it ignores specific context and situational plays. And Carey, I think, if you're gonna have that kind of a presence down low, you have to be a threat to at least draw the foul. And that's what I'm saying is like, he doesn't even have to score, just draw the foul and go to the foul line. Yeah,
but see, he's such a bad free throw shooter. I'd rather him pass the ball to somebody who can score than to go shoot, and 45% from the free throw line.
52.
That may be true.
Sorry,
and that's
52.
I mean,
sorry, Jalen.
I'm okay with one of two. 52% from a guy in that position is not terrible to me. But him dishing it out to
it's
Boz.
Not terrible to me either, but there's a better option.
Yeah, but him dishing it out to Boz so that he can, rim a three and us, not walk away with any points is to me a loss. I take one over none. I mean, you take one over none.
Sure, but it's just not true that every time he's passing the ball, somebody's rimming off a three and not scoring.
I think that you're giving this guy a pass in a way that is befuddling to me.
But I'm not giving him a pass. He's just basically exactly what I thought he was going to be. He is who I thought he was. He is who I thought he was. What is that quote?
Estrella's able to score from down low.
Dude, Estrella's like a seasoned older player.
What does that mean? What is that to me? Is he the guy getting the ball down low? Then that guy's got to be able to score. He's got to at least be a threat to score, or otherwise you become too one-dimensional.
Yeah, Jalen Carey is a threat to score. I mean,
he's not a threat to score.
You were saying like, I don't need Jalen Carey to score 20 points, but you weren't saying anything in November when Jalen Carey was scoring 20 points. Like, this is a guy who has shown that he can do it. I grant you, he's been off. He's not played offensively as well as he can. But that doesn't mean that he's not a valuable asset to this team in certain ways.
If you're asking me to, sure. Okay, would I rather have Jalen Carey than 15 other guys you might stack up? That's probably true. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying if you're asking me to critique the team and say where have we not succeeded, I think that his offensive play down by the basket has been underwhelming. And
agreed.
I think we agree with that. I just think you think it's a much bigger problem than we think it is.
Well, let's go ahead and take that thread and let's pull on it in a different way, because there's one thing that we've all kind of talked about is a bigger issue than this, and that would be Jacoby Gillespie's inconsistency, both in
Correct. Much bigger
scoring
problem.
and also
Agreed.
in like, you know,
Agreed.
so like to me, if we're gonna dog on guys for
Yeah.
specifically scoring, specifically offense, I'm much quicker to point the blame at someone
Yep.
like Gillespie than I am Carey, you know, because I
Yeah,
expect more of him.
I would join you there, but that just doesn't give Carey a free pass to me. I think that I can consistently say Gillespie is missing way too many wide open looks, especially from the 3-point line. And if Nate is really out, and I don't think I think he'll be fine. But let's just pretend he wasn't. Let's pretend he's out for the season, or he's out for the tournament. Then Gillespie, has got to step up and hit those threes. And I would say that's fundamentally more of an indicator of whether or not Tennessee will succeed than Carey's offensive production down low. It just doesn't change the fact for me that Jalen Carey's offensive production down low is bad. It has been
I don't
for a
think,
really long time.
But you're implying that you're not giving him a pass, and we are. And we've said on previous
You are giving him a pass.
No, we're not. We've said on previous podcasts before this that he does need to be scoring the ball more, and he has regressed. But we just don't think it's as big a problem as you.
Well, how's he going to score the ball more if he's dishing it out all the time, which is what you just said you want him to do?
Yeah, not indefinitely, but I think that there is situations where if a guy's struggling, regardless of who it is, if you're not seeing the ball go through the hoop, it is better for the team before you regain confidence to dish the ball. That's just good basketball.
Sure, but we're running out of time. I mean, we got one more home game and then it's the SEC tournament. So the guy's got to get confidence at some point because the thing's got to change, is what I'm saying.
I agree. No one's disagreeing with that.
And that's not to say that Gillespie – and not just Gillespie. I mean, I thought Boswell has hit some good threes recently, and that's encouraging. But we're not a really good 3-point shooting team. With Nate down, I don't really know who the go-to guy is to get a deep shot. And so, I think that's more indicative of why Tennessee. If you were asking me why is Tennessee not going to go deep in the NCAA tournament, it's going to be more because they don't have an alpha. They don't have somebody that I think they can say, okay, we're in a dogfight. There's 2 minutes left on the clock. We need you to go win this basketball game. We don't have that guy. Totally agree. Why are we going to be in that situation? 2 minutes to go in a dogfight. We're down by 2, or we're down by 4, or we're up by 3, and we got to hold on to a lead. Why are we not just dominating somebody? It's because we can't consistently hit the 3-point shot. I think those are more glaring problems.
And turnovers. I would say turnovers are a big problem.
Yeah. Well, that's another piece that I have written down that we haven't even
particularly
gotten to yet.
Guard play at the end of the game.
Yes.
So I would say those are all bigger problems. I just think that Carey is also a real problem.
Yeah. Nick, did you have someone specifically who impressed you or someone who disappointed you from that South Carolina game?
Yeah, I thought Evans played pretty well. Thought he hit some good shots, played probably better than I've seen him play. Joe's right. JP played well. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone dunk the ball more uncontested than Okpara dunked the ball in that game. Yeah. I mean, I think there were literally like 10 or 12 alley-oops just wide open.
Between him and Estrella, it was an absolute slam fest.
So it's hard not to say those guys. It just feels like South Carolina is a really bad basketball team and just did not defend the post at all night long.
Right.
So I'm going to go with Evans, I think. So
and so I agree with that. Amari Evans had a great game. I would say just generally, this isn't specific to the South Carolina game, though he did do pretty well in that game. I would say I've just been really pleased with Ethan Berg and his uptick in minutes over the last how many games. Yep. I really like watching him play because he seems really like feisty and he's a good on-ball defender, and I just like the way he plays. He's kind of a pure passer at the guard position, and I like his game. Now his shot looks absolute buns. Like when he shoots a 3-pointer, it looks terrible. He's made a few, but like every time he shoots, I'm like, oh, please do not shoot ever again. But I like the way he plays.
It's like Clockwork Orange, where they're holding your eyes open. You got to watch it.
Exactly. Yeah. Or Bird Box. That was another theme from there.
Yeah, that's right.
But Ethan Berg has been someone that I've enjoyed getting to watch play, who had some bad moments early in the year. He's kind of been in the doghouse a little bit here and there with Rick, and I've just been glad to see him play well. And he seems to be kind of a likable guy and has good energy. So I kind of find myself cheering for him. I wanted to mention, though, Joe, you said kind of when we were doing the Carey discussion, you were talking about how this team's really good at offensive rebounding, best in the country statistically, blah, blah, blah. From my like coaching background in basketball, whenever I hear someone say that, which obviously it's a good thing. Like I off like rebounding the ball, period, is good. But what
Sure.
I'm hearing, and this isn't like
we miss a lot of shots,
right? And this isn't inflammatory at all. What it says to me is like, maybe we're not a very good shooting team, and that's why we're rebounding so well. And obviously, I think we all kind of agree that's definitely part of it. So if you told me we could finish the year at a slower pace offensively rebounding the ball, I would actually maybe be a little bit optimistic about that, because maybe that means we're scoring more.
But that's classic Tennessee, right? Oh, the one thing we're good at is actually indicative of a thing that we're actually really bad at. That's probably why we're not going to go deep in the tournament.
Yeah,
right.
So the thing that wins you the game, putting the ball through the hoop. We're not very good at that. So
it's terminal. It's terminal.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because to me, right, if it was just about like, we have the best rebounding as a skill team in the country, we would also be really well in defensive rebounds, right? But it's it's not like we're killing it on the defensive end. I mean, we rebound fine, but it's not like we're number one in defensive rebounds, number one offensive rebounds. Yeah, right. So it's just a little bit like comical, I think, is the best word of like, of course we're really good at something that also means we're not very good. But anything else from the South Carolina game? I mean, obviously it was kind of a dominant win, and Joe, I do think that JP Estrella played a really good game, but obviously we've already kind of touched on it, but there's just a part of me, it's like, is South Carolina, I mean, obviously they're not very good, but like,
that was my note at the end of the game. What I said was, I don't know how to rank this win when I consider the quality of opponent, right? What does this win actually tell us about the team? I mean, it was their senior night and that place was empty. I mean, they're bad, and so, almost to the point where I almost felt sorry for them.
I'd just like to hear a definitive yes or no with no commentary. Does Jalen Carey suck? From Joe.
Yes.
Oh my goodness! Get out of here!
Get out of here, dude! That's crazy. Yeah. So, listener, if you haven't listened to our podcast last week where we had Reed Bacon on, definitely please go do that, because Reed was a great guest. We already kind of touched on that, but it can't be said enough. But Joe, last week we brought that discussion up because it's been a hot topic of discussion between us. And yeah, dude, I just don't know how you can say, like, again, we're granting you, like, the offensive scoring is down, he needs to do better. Even if you were 100% right that, like, him passing the ball is not good because he should be shooting, but also him missing is not good, so he should just be scoring. Even if all that's true, he still doesn't suck. Like, he's still filling his role.
Yeah. When I say that, I mean within the context of, on this team what does Tennessee need from him, and then versus what are they getting from him? I would reiterate that would I rather have Jalen Carey than 30 other guys? The answer to the question is probably yes.
Here's the commentary that I said we didn't need.
Well, everything's got to be taken in context. You're making me you're painting me out to be a villain here. I need Jeff.
Oh, you are the villain.
I'm calling him. I'm calling him. Jeff would agree with me.
He'd be wrong too.
Goodness gracious! I don't know, man. I'm really trying.
He's not playing at the standard. Then that means, to some degree, he sucks.
I can't even. We're going to talk about baseball because I just can't with this man.
Yeah. So wrapping up basketball. I mean, Tennessee has one game left, listener. We play Vanderbilt at home on Saturday. That's this Saturday, March 7th. This is our final game of the season. It's at 1 p.m. on ESPN. Guys, before we move on to basketball, we've already beat Vanderbilt once on the road. There is a chance that Tennessee can still secure that double bye. And so obviously need to win this game, need to get some help. Do you guys
What's a prediction?
Do they need help? I think they get it with a win, don't they?
No, because we are tied in like a 3 or 4-way tie now. It's definitely 3, maybe 4. But the 3-way tie is Missouri, Kentucky, us for that 4 seed. And Missouri and Kentucky both have the head-to-head against us. So we need those teams to drop a game in order to get in.
I thought they had lost both those teams had lost their most recent game, which put us ahead. But I may be wrong about that.
Kentucky, I'm trying to think.
I'm almost positive if we beat Vanderbilt, we get the double bye.
Okay.
I'm
Okay,
almost
well,
positive.
we'll see what happens, obviously, and we'll address that if they win and we don't, then we can talk about it. If they win and we do, obviously you're right, and then if we lose, then it doesn't matter. So we'll kind of talk about that next week. But
just remember that if I'm wrong about the double bye, I'm still right about Jalen Carey.
Get out of here. All right, so guys, are we going to beat Vanderbilt at home? Feel free to answer it however you will. Nick, what do you think?
Nope.
Okay.
Can't beat them twice.
My heart says yes. My better instincts, history, knowledge tell me no.
Grok says if Tennessee beats Vanderbilt, then in the finale, that the Volunteers would secure a double bye.
There you go, Joe. Nice. Let's hope Grok's right. So,
But you don't have to worry about it.
Let's just say that's true. I'm going to make my prediction based on that's true. If that's true, then I think Tennessee definitely finds a way to lose because they won't be able to do what it takes to secure that double bye. That's what I'm going to
say. Vanderbilt is a great offensive team. They shot really bad last time. They're going to want revenge. We beat them on their home court. They're going to shoot better. They're going to be ready to play. We're going to lose. Ament's not going to play. We're not going to win that game.
Give me the Vols by 8.
Can't wait for next week. Can't wait for next week.
Give me the Vols by 8.
Can't wait for next week.
I love the confidence, Joe. I wish I had your heart, but I don't. All right, let's move on.
If Tennessee loses, I hope Jalen Carey scores 20. It'll be the best of both worlds. It'll be such a nice silver lining. Oh,
hey, listen. If they lose, but Jalen Carey scores 20, I'll be the happiest guy on this podcast because it's what we need.
I'm going to say this: if Jalen Carey scores 20, we will lose.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, that's I don't think that's what we need.
Well, okay, I don't think that. I've already said I don't think we need him to score 20. I'm saying if his offensive production goes up, if he has good looks and he actually takes them, and he actually starts to produce down low, I think that's a really good sign for Tennessee moving forward. So.
What percentage does Jalen Carey have to shoot against Vanderbilt for you to give a yes or for you to give a no that Jalen Carey does not suck? What's he got to go from the field?
You're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah, I want it on film.
I don't know enough about basketball to know what is appropriate. I don't know. Give me.
Yeah, we know.
That's why this is so crazy. You say I don't know as much about basketball, yet you call our players bad all the time, and we're telling you he's not bad.
Oh, come on. Okay, first of all, I'm not in a massive minority. There are a lot of people that have said similar things about Jalen Carey. You two have also said similar things about Jalen Carey, just not willing to put as fine a point on it as I am.
We're just not as mad about it.
And I'm not mad. I'm not mad.
You're in the chat about it all the time.
You're asking
never says anything about Jacoby Gillespie. This man's just on Carey all the time.
All the time.
Hey, hang on. I will not be slandered this way. At the end of the South Carolina game, Gillespie ran and dished like a general, but especially if Nate doesn't come back on all cylinders, he definitely needs to hit his wide open looks. I am criticizing Gillespie in the chat. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And which one have you criticized more harshly and more often?
Carey.
And which one's more important to this basketball team?
Gillespie.
Okay.
But that doesn't change the fact that
you talk about baseball now. I feel satisfied. You can talk about baseball now.
Carey can give me 10 points. I'll be good.
Okay.
10.
All
right. Very good. Okay, so baseball. Tennessee had 5 games since we last recorded. The first one and kind of the most, I would say, not necessarily the most important, but definitely the biggest game was our Friday night game against UCLA. So Tennessee lost to UCLA in Texas. 5-12 was that final score. So just some quick stats from that game. Tegan Coons got credited with the loss in that game, making him 1-1 on the year. He threw 6 innings pitched. He gave up 6 runs on 6 hits with 10 Ks. He threw a pretty clean game. Not a lot of walks, not a lot of hit by pitches, anything. I actually don't think he had any of either one. Not bad, not a bad showing for Tegan Coons at all, especially when you and we'll get into the specifics of the game, but especially when you factor in that he pitched 6 innings and UCLA's biggest scoring inning was in the 7th. So that did not come off his arm. At the plate, Chris Newstrom just dominated on Friday night. He went 3 for 4 with an RBI and scored 2 runs himself. Was a double away from or triple away.
No, he had a triple. I think he was a double away.
Double away from the cycle in that game. What were your biggest takeaways in the UCLA game? Nick, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think I actually was impressed with Coons. It was kind of a feast or famine. Like it was either he was striking somebody out or they hit a home run. Felt like,
Yeah.
And but to his credit, that means he's throwing strikes, right? So
Right.
he was around the plate. When he left the game, he left his team in a position to win that game. So I don't feel. I feel like, especially against the caliber of team that UCLA clearly is right now, I was satisfied with what he did. And exactly what you said. I mean, the thing that stood out the most for me that game was that Newstrom was just knocking it around. And so those two things that you mentioned were my biggest takeaways. Another thing is that this team is, I think we've already said this, but when they're in these kinds of games and they're young, they also just have a lot of new guys, even the guys that aren't young or new. Like it's a very different team than the last few years. A lot of newcomers. And so I just don't think anyone's emerged as a leader yet, but they're just going to have somebody on the field to fire them up, keep them in games, not roll over when you get down. And it just kind of felt like that one got away from them a little bit and they didn't have any fire to try to climb back in it. So their approach at the plate seemed to diminish as the game went on. I felt like they were having a better approach earlier in that game, putting the bat on the ball. And it just kind of felt like they hung their heads and rolled over a bit to me as the game went on. So,
yeah. Joe, you got anything?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway as well is, when Tennessee baseball has been dominant, you just never, it was kind of like the way that I don't know, probably like a New England Patriots fan felt, back during their dynasty days, or the way that Alabama football fans have felt for the last, 2 decades or whatever, which is that it doesn't matter what the scoreboard says. We're just never out until, not that it's impossible for a team to lose, but like we're just going to fight to the last second, and we're always going to be a threat to win. Tennessee baseball has been the closest thing in Tennessee athletics to really being able to deliver on that level in recent years. And my takeaway was the same as Nick's, which was I don't get that impression from this team, that this team doesn't have that sort of X factor that says it doesn't matter what the scoreboard says, we're going to win. We're just going to win. And I don't care if it's at the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs, we're going to win. And that I think is, again, I don't have much to disagree with Nick on this. I think that some of that's like personalities in the dugout, who's your guy, going back to the basketball team, who's your guy. And I think that's true even with all of Tennessee's losses. Like I felt like the series that they lost previous weekends was kind of a similar deal. They had to walk it off in the first game, and that just seemed like it rattled them. Like oh, we're not good enough to beat, and to compete with these guys. And that is like a disappointing downtick from the culture of Tennessee, what the culture of Tennessee baseball has been in years past. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's evident that like there's just a little bit of, and it's probably just their immaturity, they're being young, but there's evident there's like a little bit of lack of, I don't know, swagger or like electricity in the dugout. It just feels like there's a little bit less moxie, if you will, on this team, and I hope they can find it, just because that's kind of defined Tennessee baseball since 2018, since Tony Vitello took over. And I think we all kind of like playing the role of the bad guy in college baseball. I mean, I think we all kind of like that. We like this team has found kind of its role in baseball. And I was a little disappointed, I guess, ultimately with that game. Obviously, we went on record. I think Nick and I both picked Tennessee to win. And, in that 6th inning, I mean, you're down 5-0, and, you score 4 runs in the 6th. And that in that inning, in that half inning, it really felt like this is the Tennessee of old. This is the team that kind of like you're describing, though, that's never out of it, that's going to, battle back and is confident and has that just thing about them, that it factor. They're always going to find a way to be competitive. And then, obviously you turn right around in the top of the 7th and you give up, what,
it was like a 2-run home run, I think, right off the bat.
And you gave up 6 runs total in that inning, and it just, I mean, you just never recovered after that. And so that was disappointing, man. I wanted to take a second to say, like, Will Gasparino for UCLA, outfielder number 9. That dude is insane.
Yep, he's a freak.
I think he hit 2 bombs in that game, and every time he swung the bat, man, he just looked elite. I mean, he looks really good. I mean, that's probably definitely going to be a Golden Spikes candidate. He might win the thing already.
Yeah.
And I mean, he just looks really good. He killed us at the plate. I mean, he was absolutely a dog up there. And but yeah, I was proud of how Coons pitched. It was good to see, the guy that's kind of getting touted as like a first round draft pick, obviously your ace on the squad. And, he gives up, like we said, 6 runs, but 5 of those were in the first 6 innings. And, getting through 6 innings against a team like that, and you're down by 1 run, I don't hate how his night turned out, but obviously when you look at the final score, it doesn't reflect kind of how close Tennessee was in, the late innings of that game. So overall, I don't think this is like a death nail or anything for the team. Obviously it sucks to lose against a team that would look, when you get late in the season, like that win, if we were able to win that game, would look so good on your resume, and would just be a really good, like, momentous win for the team and for the season. So I was bummed that we lost for that reason, but ultimately I wasn't necessarily disappointed, I would say, in how the game turned out. On Saturday, we also played Arizona State this weekend, and we beat them 5-3. Landon Mack got the win on the mound in that game. He went 5 innings and gave up 2 runs on 7 hits with 5 strikeouts, a base on balls, and a hit by pitch. Cam Appenzeller got his first save of the season in that game. Blaine Brown and Henry Ford led the way at the plate. They went 2-4 and 2-5, 2 for 4 and 2 for 5 respectively. They each had an RBI. What did you guys think about the Arizona State game?
I'll let Joe go first.
I thought it was a good bounce back win, a good get right game. I thought the boys played well. Henry Ford is actually on my list of guys to talk about tonight. Like he just consistently seems to deliver at the plate. I think he's kind of the silent, one of the more less touted bats that we have, but he just consistently delivers in key moments, and he led the way in that game. So just a good win. I think was Arizona State undefeated at that point? I think
yes.
They were. Yeah. So good win.
Yep, felt like it was a good win. It was good to see him. This is kind of a theme. I'll try to just say this one more time, and then because this is, for me, it's been a takeaway from this most recent stretch of games. It's just that our pitchers are throwing strikes. I don't feel like anyone is probably as dominant as the pitching that we've had, at least at this juncture, the last several years. But everybody's around the plate. Everybody's throwing strikes. Everybody seems to have good enough stuff to win on most nights. And so, not a lot of walks, not a lot of hit by pitches. So to me, that was the biggest takeaway even from the Arizona State game. I mean, you had a couple guys basically win that game with their bats, and but pitching just kept you in it. They suppressed Arizona State, and so it's just good. It's good to see guys throw strikes. You always have a chance to win when your guys are throwing strikes.
Yeah, in that game specifically, I agree. I am curious, Nick. When you say, our guys have been keeping around the plate, not walking a ton of people, when you're speaking of that more generally, or maybe you were only speaking the Arizona State game, so you can clarify that. But if you were speaking more generally, do you feel like that applies to the starters and the bullpen, or just the starters, or just the bullpen? What did you mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that applies mostly to the starters, except for I think in the Virginia Tech game, I think Blanco struggled a bit more in that area. But, Coons particularly, Landon Mack in that game. And I just watched it tonight, but who pitched tonight? Was there Tracy against Oakland? I think it was his first start.
It was,
yeah.
I can't remember his first name.
Yeah, through a lot of through. I think it's alliterated. I think it's like TT Tracy something. I can't remember.
Okay.
But anyways, he also threw a lot of strikes. So I would say mostly the starters. I think our bullpen's a little bit more suspect.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Like it's felt like our bullpen is struggling at specifically throwing strikes, and that's why I wanted to ask you more specifically because I have felt like just as a general kind of takeaway from the season so far that our bullpen has shown flashes of being really good, but they seem to struggle specifically with putting guys, giving out free bases, whether that's hitting them or
Yeah,
walking them.
sure.
I just the bullpen is a little bit concerning with me because I'm just like, the one thing you can't do in relief is walk people. Like
Right.
you can
Yeah.
give up. Like it's kind of understood at high level baseball. Like when your starter goes out, you're going to give up some runs, right? And
Yeah.
that's okay. But like you can't just be handing out free bases and giving up unearned runs. Like that's
Yeah.
bad baseball.
Gotta make 'em earn
And
it.
so I just
Can I
yeah.
can
Go
I
ahead.
interject here because I had it on my note. I had on one of my notes to talk about. Is it just me, and this could just be a perception thing that's not really true in reality, but as I've watched Tennessee baseball this season, it feels like our HPB number is way high. Like I feel like we're hitting guys constantly. Is that just me, or do you think that there's some truth to our guys hitting and just giving free base to the opponent by hitting their batters? I feel like they're doing
I
that a
definitely
ton.
felt like that was true against Virginia Tech. I don't know about generally. It hasn't felt to me. It hasn't felt like. And
Excessive.
again, excessive, especially for the starters. Probably the bullpen more, but I mean, Blanco dinged a few guys against
Mhm.
Virginia Tech, but other than that was the one game that it felt like we're just hitting everybody to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, Joe, to answer your question, I feel like our bullpen specifically is hitting more people than our bullpen in years past.
Yeah.
But also, this bullpen is just so different than every bullpen we've had under Tony Vitello because, we've really had a lot of experienced guys in the bullpen, whether that be guys that have spent a few years at Tennessee. You think of Camden Sewell, Redmond Walsh, these guys who had kind of been around a lot. Kirby Cannell, also, guys like that. And then even when you did have someone new on the team, right? You think of like Aaron Combs. That guy was still an experienced college baseball player who'd played, a few years. And it feels like this team, specifically again with the bullpen, you've got a lot of guys who've just played 1 year or 2 years somewhere else, and now they're on Tennessee's team. And so it just feels like we got some experience in our bullpen. And there's just a lot of new faces. There's not that one. I mean, Arvidsson is the close you could come to like a guy who's like been on the team and you feel like should be carrying us in the bullpen. Appenzeller is young, but he's played really good. Arvidsson has been interesting because he gave up that home run against UCLA in the 7th, and I feel like he's not pitching as well as he was expected to pitch.
Yep.
And so you're obviously going to need him to figure that out if you want to have a trip to Omaha or whatever your expectations are for this season.
Sure.
To answer your question, yeah, I do think to me there's been an uptick specifically with the bullpen as far as free passes. But, yeah. So yeah, I mean, overall though, like you said, Joe, undefeated team. It was nice to get a win, nice to bounce back. You scored 5 runs, which of course is enough to win in baseball. But it's college baseball, and we're Tennessee. Like it just feels like we're capable of scoring more runs. Especially when you're playing against a team like Arizona State, where you are kind of stringing some hits together early in the game. It's the second inning, we're scoring 3-4 runs, and then so you score 4 runs in the second, but then you only score 1 the rest of the game. I don't really know what to do with that because it feels like we should be better. As obviously as you get more at bats, you should be seeing the ball better and whatnot. Now, maybe Arizona State, I haven't watched them super closely. Maybe their bullpen's really good, right? And so maybe that's why. But I just still feel like my biggest concern, even though we've addressed kind of the bullpen and the walks, I still just am like, why is this team not hitting better than they are?
Yep.
And I just don't really know the answer to that question. But I'd rather be having that conversation now than I would, in May or June. So I'm glad that we're at least having it now. But I just, I want us to figure that out because it is concerning me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the hitting is, and I've said this a couple times on earlier pods, but you're right. Even with the bullpen being more volatile, no pun intended. Um, it's, I mean, Arizona State scored 3, Virginia Tech scored 1. I know ETSU or Oakland are bad, but they scored 3 combined. So, in your last 4 games, you've given up 7 runs. So even though your bullpen's been bad, they've still gotten themselves out of jams, even if you want to argue it's inferior opponents. So I am just more concerned with the fact that we're not hitting the ball like we typically hit the ball. And I also am more hopeful for this team because I think that's a thing that can come more than relying on your bullpen to somehow figure it out on the stretch.
No, I definitely agree. And to that point, before we move on to the Virginia Tech game, Arizona State game, late in that game, we did kind of get in a hairy situation, and the bullpen was able to work their way out of it. So I was glad to see that. And obviously, you slammed the door and won that game, which is great. I think that just shows, we might as well just say Arizona's a pretty good team. I mean, there's no reason to assume otherwise right now. And so, you found a way to win against a pretty good team. We would like to score more, but I think ultimately the bullpen might be who they are. They might get marginally better, might get marginally worse, but that way that this team can make drastic improvements is doing it at the plate.
Yep.
Yeah.
So on Sunday, we beat Virginia Tech 3-1. So a little bit of a low-scoring game there. Evan Blanco got the start in that game. He pitched 5.1 innings. He gave up 1 run on 2 hits with 6 Ks. He had a walk and 3 HBPs in that game. Funny enough, Mark Hindy got credited with the win, and he threw 0.2 innings. Yeah, he didn't even throw a full inning. He gave up 0 runs on 0 hits with a strikeout. So fun little baseball stat there.
What more do you want from a guy in 2/3?
Right. And this is – I had this argument with my dad recently, who's a faithful listener to the podcast. My dad is constantly saying stats don't lie, right? Stats don't lie. That's what he says all the time. And I don't
lie
know
all the time.
They lie all the time, Dad. So,
constantly.
Understand this guy he got 2 outs. This guy got 2 outs in a 27-out baseball game, and he got credited with the win. So, I mean, that's baseball. I love baseball. I love the funky stuff in that. But quirky. You cannot tell me that stats don't lie because they clearly do, and they did in this game. But, yeah, Evan Blanco, not his best start. Nick, we've already kind of talked about this. We'll talk about it more. Not his best start, but again, gave up 1 run, and that was the only run. So, not terrible. Braden Krenzel got his first save of the season. At the plate, Blaine Brown quietly kind of led, going 1 for 3 with an RBI, and he scored a run as well. What were your biggest takeaways from this game? Joe, go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm going to dish it to Nick because I think
please.
I was working during this game, I think.
Oh, okay.
So this was the Sunday game, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch it either, but I did watch I watched extended highlights of this game, but I did not catch it live. Thank you, Wheels. Yeah, how did you know? That's what everybody watches. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Wheels for all of the good work. He's doing the Lord's work, posting those highlight videos. Yeah, I did watch the extended highlights via Wills. And I think that's why I felt like this was the first starting pitching that I was concerned with. Because when you're watching on highlights like that and a guy plinks 3 guys, you kind of see it in the highlights like that.
Right.
And so it felt like, what the heck happened? So, I probably don't know enough context to say like what my biggest takeaway was, except for the fact that Blanco just in the highlights I watched, did not look very good, but like they also only scored 1 run. So I don't, does that mean Virginia Tech's bad? I don't know what their record is, but it kind of felt to me like maybe we just eked out a win against a bad baseball team.
Yep. I agree. I mean, the ACC as a whole has been down. I mean, the SEC has won like the last, is it 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 college baseball championships. And so the SEC is kind of the dominant conference in baseball. Obviously, that's not seeming to be true right now in football. Basketball is super, volatile. Like it depends on the year. I think, was it last year that SEC had like 3 teams in the Final Four or 2 at least.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's easy, obviously, and we don't need to spend a bunch of time carrying water. But SEC obviously is a great conference all around, but especially in baseball, like they're kind of the dominant conference.
Yep.
And the ACC as a whole has just been down. I mean, North Carolina is kind of the only team that seems to be consistently pretty good. Florida State has been up and down. Virginia's up and down. Virginia Tech is just a team in the ACC, so they don't move the needle for me at all, other than the fact that because it's pre-conference baseball and you're playing teams like Oakland on a Wednesday night, it's more exciting to watch an ACC team play. But I don't think they're a good baseball team, and I didn't think Tennessee played particularly well on Sunday.
Yeah.
So the last thing we have here about baseball was 2 midweek games. So Tennessee beat ETSU last night, Tuesday night, 7-1, and we beat Oakland tonight, 11-2. So I admittedly did not watch the Oakland game tonight. I did watch the ETSU game last night. So we won both these games in, I would say, easy-ish fashion. What does this tell you about the team? Does it give you any more information, any notes in particular, or is this kind of just midweek game, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's bad baseball teams, but it's still baseball, so you can lose to anybody any night. So we notoriously lost to a bad ETSU team last year in a midweek game. The 2025 team did. So you came out and did what you're supposed to. You scored 18. You beat those teams combined 18-3. Oakland is particularly bad. I started that game late, but was able to kind of grind through and catch up and watch it all before the recording. But everybody hit. Adriel Antigua hit his very first home run ever tonight.
Oh, let's go.
Let's go. Yeah. Sorry, I said Adriel.
No, you're good. You're good.
Ariel Antigua hit his very first home run. Garrett Wright, who was my kind of breakout pick from some of the new guys, laid one of the sweetest bunts I've ever seen down the first baseline, and
nice.
legged out a hit. And so, and then I think his name's Grimmer, freshman first baseman.
Yeah, Blake Grimmer. Yeah.
Looked really good defensively, hit the ball well, hit a dinger, hit one off.
He's coming off an injury, so he's a guy that
that was his first game.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a guy that a lot of people think could be an everyday starter on this team. Is probably one of the best pure hitters on this team.
He looked really good.
We need him to kind of step in, and I think getting him back could maybe, be a little bit of a spark in the lineup. So hopefully he's healthy and keeps progressing.
And, I don't remember the stat line, but he definitely hit a dinger, and he definitely also had a nice little rope down the first baseline for a base hit. And
beautiful.
So made a couple really good defensive plays. Like, he just stood out tonight, even though that Oakland team was bad. Like, the right fielder had to end up diving for a routine pop fly and missed it. Like, it was tough to watch. Felt bad for the young man, but not bad enough to want him to have caught it. But
suck it, kid.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess you're like, you hit the ball against a team you should hit the ball against. And so if we're wanting them to hit the ball more, I guess it's just a good sign that they scored 18 runs against 2 inferior opponents this week. So
yeah, for sure. So this is a random question, but I wanted to ask it. So, Tennessee has been rocking the, smoky gray uniforms a fair amount over the last couple of years in baseball. And, they had the block Tennessee in the Nike font across the chest. I don't know. Did you guys notice the gray jerseys against Arizona State? They had the Vols, like it's this logo, the Vols cursive across the chest with the white outline. I thought the gray jerseys look way better than the years past. Did you guys agree with that or think it's worse? Or
no, I totally agree. It popped, and I hated the smoky gray jerseys from the past.
Me too.
Favorite jerseys in the most recent era were the creams.
Nice.
Gosh, I love
the creams are nice.
Those Sherbert guys. I know their record's bad in them. Whatever.
They look
I don't
good.
care.
They just look good.
They look good. Look good. Play good. I don't know. So I do miss those jerseys, but no, I agree. Those smoky grays are a huge upgrade over the previous.
I've always been a fan of the smoky grays in all of its iterations, but I prefer the script balls. So.
Smoky gray can go die.
Oh my gosh!
I'm not a fan.
Not a fan either.
Gosh, you guys are determined to be against me tonight.
I mean, honestly,
brother,
dude,
you look at that shirt you're wearing. You got the best looking shirt on of anybody. Look at that color. Look at that color.
I bleed orange. You know this.
See orange.
I dig the Smokies. I like the smoky grays.
Something about them orange britches.
If we're going an alternate color, I just think the black jerseys in baseball, in basketball, in football
look cleaner.
Just look so much better than the grays in any of the sports. I just think the blacks look so much better.
I just think gray does not look good regardless of who's wearing it. I don't know if I've ever seen like gray jerseys that I thought looked really good.
Great. Okay.
And
because I'm actually
in baseball, particularly, I don't like it.
Oh, okay. See, I'm kind of an advocate for. I like the traditional gray pant look. Like if you think when I picture
gray pants are fine with like a white with white tops or like colored.
See,
I don't like all gray.
When I think Tennessee baseball national championship, and this is true for every fan, but like I just see black top, gray pants. Like that's just what I see, and obviously there's just some emotional connection there. I just love the look. I love the black jersey with the gray pants, just the classic look.
It's much better than gray on gray. I'll tell you
that. Yes, I agree. I'm not a fan. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the smoky gray on smoky gray.
I've never have been. Not in any sport. I've never been a fan of the grays. So
I think gray on grays look good since the 19th century. So.
Oh gosh,
nice.
You're sick.
Well. Listener, that's pretty much all we have tonight. A little bit of a shorter episode for us. Not so much going on right now, just with basketball kind of winding down, but ramping up to the postseason. Baseball's in full swing, but we got conference play coming up soon. Nick, why don't you go ahead and plug our socials and we'll get out of here.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, listener. Please make sure to share with all of your other fellow Vol fans that are sharing in this terminal illness, this terminal diagnosis that we all share. And they can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, and you can also find us on X. We are at VOLatile_1998. So please make sure to share, especially in these seasons where, things, football is dormant right now. Basketball doesn't look great, and baseball, it's not exactly what you want, but you've got some signs of hope and life there. But we all know that, was it Murphy's Law is whatever can happen will happen. And the VOLatile law is whatever the worst case scenario is for the Vols that can happen will happen. And so you have to be ready for that. You can't rely on a little hope because you've been hitting the ball a little bit better. Things will come crashing down at any moment. And what you should do is reach for the VOLatile podcast to help you get through it, because we're here for you, and we want to go through it with you. We want to be here. This is your weekly therapy session. So
don't be a hero. Manage the pain.
Yeah. Lean when you feel it. Just lean in. Just ring up the VOLatile podcast, and we'll work through it together. Because we all need this. So thank you for listening. Please, like, subscribe, all the things. Follow us on Spotify. And we'll go through it together.
Yeah. VOLatile Podcast is here to be your antidepressant. Listener, thank you for listening. It's terminal.